The Gospel this morning is from the 19th chapter of Luke. Jesus triumphs into Jerusalem. After he had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. When he had come near Bethphage and Bethany, at the place called the Mount of Olives, he sent two of the disciples, saying, "Go into the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find there a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, 'Why are you untying it?' just say to them, 'The Lord needs it.'" So those who were sent departed and found it as he had told them. As they were untying the colt, the owners asked them, "Why are you untying the colt?" They said, "The Lord needs it." Then they brought it to Jesus, and after throwing their cloaks on the colt, they set Jesus on it. As he rode along, people kept spreading their cloaks on the road. As he was now approaching the path down from the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to praise God joyfully with a loud voice for all the deeds of power that they had seen, saying, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven." Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, order your disciples to stop." He answered, "I tell you, if they were silent, the stones would shout out." And again from the book of Luke, the 23rd chapter. Pilate then called together the chief priests, the leaders, and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who is perverting the people, and here I have examined him in your presence, and I have not found him, this man, guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. Indeed, he has done nothing to deserve death, and I will therefore have him flogged and release him." Then they all shouted out together, "Away with this fellow, release Barabbas to us." This was a man who had been put in prison for an insurrection that had taken place in the city, and for murder. Pilate, wanting to release Jesus, addressed them again, but they kept shouting, "Crucify! Crucify him!"
Number one, all of what we do here is preaching. The music sings of our theology. The children remind us of our responsibility to pass on to the next generation what we know, and then leave them free to make sense for their generation and the generation after. The readings we hear, ancient stories that we hear over and over again every year, they preach in and of themselves. The mission work we do, it preaches. And so, I'm going to shorten my 13 and a half minute sermon down to 3. But I want you to know that there's been a lot of preaching here this morning. Don't miss it. You all know the story of the little boy who wanted to have his own first view. He wanted to see with his own eyes what his science teacher was trying to tell him about the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. And so he found a caterpillar, and he cared for the caterpillar. And one sweet day, sure enough, just as the teacher had predicted, the caterpillar started crawling up the tree, hung from a branch, started to spin a cocoon around his body. And then the child knew that all he was to do was to wait. Because though he couldn't see it, though he couldn't hear it, he was told that the butterfly was forming itself. That there would be a metamorphosis of the caterpillar into the butterfly. But as many young 10-year-old, 6-year-old boys, it was taking too long. And so he got a little pin and he started poking at the cocoon. And sure enough, he could see through the pinhole that indeed there was a butterfly forming inside of there. And so he waited a little more, and sure enough, the cocoon fell off, and he saw the butterfly. But the butterfly couldn't fly. The wings were not strong enough. It needed to stay longer in the cocoon in order for the wings to get strong and to fly. And so he noticed that the butterfly crawled around like a caterpillar. And so it is with us. If we do not learn this lesson that Jesus teaches us about vulnerability, about the ability to stand before the powers of hell and death, and to be flexible, and to bend and to bow, and to allow the pain and the suffering to run its course, we too will not be the butterflies that God designed us to be. I've been reading a lot by this author, Brené Brown. Is anyone familiar with her? She's a researcher. She is a public speaker. She is an author. She wrote Daring Greatly and Rising Strong. And she says this about vulnerability that I think will help us to understand how Jesus was able to stand before the powers of death. She says, vulnerability sounds like trust, feels like courage, and trust and courage are uncomfortable sometimes. But trust and courage are never weakness. And the trouble with us is that we sometimes see vulnerability as weakness. And Brené Brown goes on to say that she recently returned to church after years away. And she thought, in the midst of her own pain, that the church, through prayer and through community, would take her pain away, would make it better, would give her something that it would all go away. But instead, she said, I discovered that a good church is like a midwife. They just stand, the members just stand beside you, and they remind you to breathe, and to push, and to hang on. And they assure you, it's okay. There's supposed to be pain. Hang in there. The baby is coming. Too often, because we fear suffering, too often because we want to rush to Easter. Too often, because we hold Jesus up as divine and almost ignore that he was human, we miss his journey to the cross and 3 days later to resurrection. In the garden, he prayed for the cup to be taken away. He went to his closest friends and he said, "Can you not just pray 1 hour with me? I need you. Just 1 hour, just stand close by." He stood before Pilate and he was silent. I imagine he was saying to himself, "What can I say to this man in 2 minutes that a whole lifetime hadn't taught him? That you can never put love to death. There is no power on earth that can hold me in the ground." And so he walked to his death. And don't forget, on the cross, he cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And felt abandoned and alone and disconnected, only to push through the pain and to breathe deep enough to say, "Into your hands I commend my spirit. It is finished." And as much as I would love for us to just race to Easter morning, because I'm one who loves to see joy and happiness on people's faces, yet I would be irresponsible not to remind you to stop and to remember your own cross. What is it that you must pick up? And it's not just about picking the cross up. It's the way we pick it up that matters. This vulnerability that is strength, not weakness. This trust that death will not be the final answer. And so, face the cross. Do yourself a favor. Be vulnerable. Be spiritual midwives to one another. Remind one another to breathe. Remind one another to stay with the grief, to stay with the trauma, to stay in the pain. Don't be poking at the cocoon too quickly. And you are assured, every last one of us, we are assured of transformation. Because not to do it, we've all seen people who cannot do it, or do not do it, or will not do it, or don't have the disciplines to prepare themselves to do it. And they end up bitter and stiff and judgmental and rigid. And change, they resist. And so, spend these next few days in your pain. But do yourself a favor, get yourself a spiritual midwife, your spouse, your child, your friend, your pastor, your community of faith. But live it, feel it, and in due time, the cocoon will shed on its own, and you will be the beautiful butterflies that you are. Ernest Hemingway gave us a gift when he penned these words. The world breaks everyone. And after that, some are strong in the broken places. And Leonard Cohen says it. There is a crack in everything. That's the way the light gets in.